What is a seemingly harmless parenting mistake that will majorly fuck up a child later in life? I found that when my parents teased me about stuff I was clearly uncomfortable with, it made me tell them less later in life. I have a good relationship with my parents, but I don't tell them lots about my life because it's easier if they don't know, tease about it. Same for me. It was usually mild stuff like, "Okay, MCU has a crush on a girl," or something like that. But I hated the attention and it made me uncomfortable. Later in my 20s when I met my wife, she couldn't understand why I was so secretive. I'm pretty sure it's from that. I just stopped telling people things and still don't tell my parents everything that's going on in my life. I love them of course and have a great relationship with my parents. But yeah, I'm pretty sure the teasing messed me up. This except instead of teasing, worrying. My mum was always so worried about everything I did. I know it was because she loves and cares about me. But goddamn, can I go out one night without you thinking I might die? She still worries about stuff. There was a car accident in her neighborhood like a year ago in the middle of the night and she called me at 2 a.m. to make sure it wasn't me. I live like 30 minutes away. And there's nothing in her town for me to be over there unless I am visiting her lol. Edit, yes. She has a little bit of anxiety. But who doesn't these days? I love her anyway. My mum grew up with 6 brothers and 2 sisters. And she used to tease me about things I liked when I was young because she thought I needed to experience since I had no siblings. I think this had the opposite effect than she intended, since it caused me to stay friends with people who were condescending towards me because I just thought that was normal. Now I'm afraid to passionate about things she doesn't like. I didn't seriously date until I was out of my parents' mum and stepdad, real dad was cool as hell house. Because stepdad would, without fail, tease me about crushes or even platonic female friends. It went on for 5 years. Continuously. Until I moved out at 16. But it took a long time to unlearn the awkwardness, the nervousness, and the anxiety involved with even trying to pursue a relationship. Stepdad died in 1999. I don't feel bad. So please no condolences. And my mum has since married for the 3rd time. She absolutely adores my wife and kids. So she at least recognized the need to change. Pretty much my life. If you genuinely want a relationship that's closer with your kid, constantly teasing isn't going to make it happen. I never really got to fix my relationship with my mum before she passed away and I regret it. But damn it, her and my entire family constantly teasing and picking at me and judging me just ruined the first 30 years of my life. Never saying sorry to your kids. My mum only just recently started telling me sorry when she gets worked up. It's built up such a resentment for her over the years. And I also have trouble saying sorry myself because of it. Tell your kids sorry. Especially if you overreact to something they did. My parents refuse to apologize to me as apparently it's bad for saving face. I never thought about how this affected my own personality until now. I hate apologizing myself. It takes a lot of effort for me to admit I'm wrong and apologize, but I do it and I feel angry while saying it. This really fucks people up. Not following through with your promises. If you told your child you were buying ice cream tomorrow in the hopes that they'd forget and the next day when they ask you tell them no, they'll see you as unreliable. Ice cream is just the first thing that came to my mind. I'm sure someone else can explain better what I'm trying to say here without sounding so ridiculous. I taught my children at very young ages that outside of extreme circumstances failing to keep a promise made is the same as telling a lie. Therefore, I won't make promises to them that I am not absolutely certain I can keep. They learned early in life that I take my promises very seriously and will go to great lengths to honor them. We have hit very hard times recently and I have had to delay delivery on some promises, which breaks my heart. But they know that I will fulfill those promises eventually and are much more empathetic and understanding than their peers have been in similar situations. When I was a kid, maybe 8, my family went to the Mall of America. I saw the roller coaster and asked if we could ride it. My dad said yeah. We will ride it later, and later I asked and he said no. That's the first time I remember my parents lying to me. By the time I was in high school they said, "When you and your sister graduate college we will take you to Rome," and I didn't even bother getting excited because I knew it was bullshit. I have the weirdest grudge over this sort of thing. I think I was like 12? Note, I love pickles. My favorite food ever really. My mum and I had gone to a store and I didn't bring any money with me. I saw that the deli sold these huge pickles and I of course wanted one, but I didn't have the money. I asked my mum for one and she said she would bring me back the next day when I had my allowance with me. Cool. So the next day comes around. It's getting late and I remind her of her promise. She said no. She wasn't taking me to the store just for a stupid pickle. I got upset and said, "You never keep your promises." And I swear she saw red and screamed at me that I never keep my promises and I don't get to expect her to keep hers as long as I was so unreliable. For some reason this stuck with me for a very long time. I mean, I am 26 now and it still pisses me off. Never telling your child that you were wrong and that you're sorry. Just never once occurred. My father never once said I'm sorry to me. He was human. There were plenty of times he should have. My kids have heard from me plenty. Once my brother was sent to his room by my dad after they got into an argument about something stupid. I used Google to prove my brother right and we both were grounded for being disrespectful until he found out we were actually right. He never ungrounded us until the week was over and only told me he was wrong. Moral of the story: being right is disrespectful. I feel like most of these responses fall under seemingly harmful. A seemingly harmless mistake is rewarding your child with something when they do something they already enjoy. Take, for example, reading. If a child just enjoys reading, let the child read without giving any reward. Once you start rewarding the child for that act, their intrinsic motivation gets replaced. It's called the overjustification effect. I was a kid who loved to read, still do. And whenever we participated in a program that rewarded reading hours, like the library summer program where you got raffle tickets and could win stuff like baseball and museum tickets, I felt like the most glorious scammer. Joke's on you. Pizza Hut. I would have done all that reading anyway. Or worse, rewarding with candy or sweets. Not only does it make behaviors that should be intrinsically rewarding behaviors extrinsically rewarded, it develops an unhealthy relationship with sugar, tying the idea of pleasure and value to sweetness. Once kids with that connection get old enough to buy their own sugar, they retain the connection and can simply reward themselves constantly, increasing the likelihood of developing disordered eating patterns. In a different vein of thought, making finances a taboo subject. Financial illiteracy can be devastating once entering adulthood. Want to keep your children from making your own money mistakes? Don't be too proud to teach them what those mistakes were. On the same note, don't make your children feel like they're the source of all your financial woes. Talking about finances and complaining about finances are very different things. Edit. Thanks for the gold, kind stranger. I never knew my childhood traumas would get me here. My wife's parents argued about money a lot when she was young. This led my wife to become agitated whenever budgeting was brought up. Lots of bad memories attached to talk of finances. It took several years before I even knew why she got angry whenever I brought up financial planning and going over the household budget. And another year or so before we could have a rational conversation about money. So don't write about money in front of your kids. Really shouldn't fight about anything in front of your kids. But do educate your kids on budgeting and being smart with money. On this same note, my son is 3 years old. He keeps all of my coin change when I spend money and keeps it in his piggy bank. He's not allowed to spend it until it's full, doesn't take more than a couple weeks, and then we talk about what he wants to spend it on: toys, ice cream at McDonald's or something, etc. My parents never taught me the value of saving, so I'm hoping it helps him to learn to. And yes, I still buy him toys and ice cream and whatnot occasionally, but this is his money and he decides what he wants to do with it. Oh my God, my dad told me nothing. And I was interested. I wanted to know how much we made. He just gave me money when I needed or wanted it. We weren't wealthy. My mum had just died when I was really young and he was handicapped and I think he felt guilty. But it really fucked me up. I moved out right away and my first electric bill came and I'm like, oh, what's this? Looks like garbage. Of course it ended up getting shut off. I have been awful with money my entire life and am just now becoming better. Don't smother your kids. My mum quit having her own life the moment my brother and I were born. She was an incredibly devoted and loving mother, was very kind to us. But when we were born she stopped having friends. Did not work. And was home every single day from when I was born to when I moved out in my early 20s. She was very easy to upset because she had no other source of self-esteem and any time I screwed up. And I screwed up a lot. It was as if I had levied a very personal attack against her. In the last 5 years or so before I left I don't think we had a single conversation that didn't drive her to tears, and I promise I wasn't that bad. I constantly felt cornered and stressed and fell into depression as a defense mechanism. And she took my resulting lack of performance very personally, creating a very treacherous cycle that was only broken when I enlisted and finally got away. To this day I often feel like I'm a bad person who failed to live up to her love. Holy shit. It's like I wrote this. Sorry to hear you're going through the same thing. I started seeing a counselor and she really helped me to process the issues I have because of my enmeshed family. I hear you. I'm an only child and my mother stopped working after I was born and put her ambitions and energies entirely into me. That sounds like a good thing. But it's not when you want to do something that isn't part of her plan. Not congratulating your child when they achieve something. A friend of mine never got any praise from his parents growing up. Always felt that he wasn't good enough. Show the child that their hard work doesn't go unnoticed. But don't just show them love when they achieve something. They are good as they are and always deserve love. When they achieve something, be happy for them. But if they don't achieve something, they aren't less worthy or something. My mum told me I was too stupid to graduate high school. Never bothered to show up to the ceremony because she didn't want to see my dad's side of the family. She tried making my graduation about her. And I hate her for that. Probably always will. Not creating a safe space for your kids to tell their secrets and make mistakes. When I was younger, I excitedly confided in my mum about my first boyfriend. But instead of calmly talking me through this, she immediately brought my dad in the conversation and they both yelled at me and forced me to break up with him. My parents sat me down at the kitchen table and forced me to write a letter to my boyfriend and tell him that I didn't want to see him anymore. I cried the entire time. After I was done, they posted pictures of the letter all over Facebook and acted like it was so cute. Dude, I was 5 and I liked this teacher, like kids do. Told my parents and they laughed and made jokes about it to the point where my aunts and cousins knew about it and they still bring it up sometimes up till now. And they wonder why I don't talk as much as I did when I was a kid. Not stopping when your child says stop. Whether it's teasing, or tickling, or resting. Kids who have parents that don't respect their boundaries always seem to end up being the biggest dicks and bullies because they've learned they don't have to respect other people's feelings. One parent on AFV got that lesson down pat. She was tickling the kid. The kid said, "Stop, I have to pee," but the parent persisted. The parent then acted surprised when the kid peed on her. AFV is America's funniest home videos. A prime source to witness bad parenting and the result thereof. Not hugging your kid. Or telling them you love them. You can feed them dinner and send them to bed on time every night and they're still going to end up with a personality disorder because you never fucking hugged them. Completely agree. My parents are very kind and always made sure me and my sibling had everything we needed. However, they were not affectionate people. We never heard them saying stuff like, "I love you," or "I'm proud of you," or got hugged as kids. Today as an adult, it took me forever to show people I like them and not feel embarrassed about it. I still can't say "I love you" to anyone without getting anxious. Well, in most Asian families, There isn't much hugging or "I love yous." I might have heard my parents tell me they love me maybe once or twice my whole life. At least that I'm aware of. Asian culture doesn't really like PDA either. So I never saw my parents show affection to each other. It's unfortunate. But that's just how Asian cultures are. Mocking them. Laughing at them. Adults do it to each other all the time. But kids who haven't been immersed in the background cruelty of our culture for years don't understand that it's just the language of the land. And not that they themselves are particularly unworthy of respect. I got laughed at and mocked a few times as a kid, and that shit hurts a lot. There was one time I was trying to help a friend at their birthday by taking their presents to them, but all the adults and my parents thought I was being selfish and wanted them for myself and joked and laughed at me and just ignored me explaining myself and carried on. I think that hurt my self-esteem a lot in the long run. I'll add this to your comment so some people actually see it. But don't scare the shit out of your kid for a good laugh. I've read a lot of stories of people who had someone terrify them at an early age by popping giant balloon in their face or popping up in a horrifying clown mask. That shit is funny as an adult, but for these kids that is the strongest emotion they have felt. It traumatizes them and gives them a phobia. Then in their teens or 20s they'll try to overpower that strong trauma and realize it gives them a rush that nothing else really does. And then they incorporate that into their sexuality. And that is how you get people who are into stuff like inflation, rubber and clown fetishes. I still remember back in 3rd, 4th grade we had just learned about the talent show coming up and all of my friends were going to be in it and I wanted to be in it as well. So when I got home from school I asked my mum if I could, and all she said was, "With what talent?" It crushed me. And honestly it still affects me to this day. Well, realistically, it'd be a helicopter parent. You always want to look out for your kid, right? Make sure they're not doing things they're supposed to do. Walk in without knocking. It ruins a relationship with a kid because even though you have a sense of privacy, the kid doesn't and will always paranoid of anyone entering their room without warning. It ruins a kid. Would my mum let me do this? Is she okay with it? My parents were helicopter parents. I was not allowed to lock my bedroom door. My mum listened in on my phone calls, this was in landline phone days, and went through my personal belongings when I wasn't home, including reading the notes that friends and I passed in school. I wasn't allowed to talk to boys or date, I'm female. Doing this only prevents your children from learning how to form healthy relationships. You should teach your children how to do things, such as date, in a safe and responsible manner, rather than ban it. Assisting them with interviews, writing their resumes, complain to their manager when the kid doesn't like the way they are treated at work, argue with the teacher or college professor on their grades. At some point they are going to have to function on their own. People that do this shit with their kids makes some pretty incompetent adults. Not giving them a factual and straightforward sex ed talk. My parents answered my questions truthfully and at an age-appropriate level throughout my childhood. And I am extremely thankful for it. Others around me have clearly not been that lucky. My parents relied on the school to teach me about sex and have never said a word about it. Luckily, I had excellent sex ed teachers who taught me everything. I'm not gonna lie. I kept anxiously waiting for the moment when they were finally gonna have the talk with me, but it just never happened. Getting them involved in problems they have no control over. My parents felt the need to keep me in the loop regarding our pending foreclosure and argue in front of me over which one was to blame when I was 10. What possible reason is there to share that with a kid? I barely slept for months. I was convinced the cops were gonna bust in at midnight and throw us all outside. I had a backpack packed at all times with a snack, bottle of water, my Power Ranger morphers, a change of clothes and a blanket just in case she kicked me out for good. I think my Game Boy was in there as well, and I was ready to grab my favorite soft toy if I needed to. It wasn't for a foreclosure. It was because all my life my mum had threatened to kick me out because she hated me. The earliest was because I woke her up with my coughing in the night. I have vague memories of waking up and not being able to breathe. I was very little. Turns out it was a sign that I had asthma, and it was left untreated until I became an adult. I literally couldn't breathe and my mum, instead of taking me to the doctors, threatened to kick me out so she could sleep. Giving in to your kids' wants and desires without upholding discipline and consequences will give your kids a large uphill battle to climb later. I say this BC my parents babied me a lot when I was young. I never had to do anything I didn't want to do. When I started getting bad grades BC I wasn't doing my homework, my parents would have conferences with my teachers so they could give me extra credit. I had a rude awakening in college when I realized how hard life is. I 100% love and adore my parents. And who's to say if they did discipline me more that I'd have turned out any different? Probably not, but you never know. But when I have kids I already know a few things I'd do differently. My father gave up telling me to clean my room so he did it for me more than once. My mum saw how much I was struggling with math so she did my math homework for me. Now as an adult I struggle with organization and keeping my home clean. I also avoid math as much as I possibly can. My mind just shuts down when I see simple math problems. When I was 4 my parents adopted a kitten. Of course I had never seen anything quite so delightful before and I could barely keep my hands off the little fur ball. So about 2 or 3 days passed. I get up in the morning and walk out and ask where is the kitten? And my parents told me that he died, implying that my rough housing had killed it. I was terrified to touch an animal for several years thereafter. In fact they had simply given the kitten back to the people they got it from. I grew up in a very strict Asian household. My parents were very strict on the "never wake us up" policy. To this day I get very anxious and refuse to wake people up, in fear of being yelled at and locked in a closet. I'm 22 years old. Telling your kid they are always a winner. We love our kids and want them to feel special. But it's setting them up to be disappointed later in life when they find out not everyone can win. Let them feel the disappointments early on. And teach them it's okay. They'll grow up better able to handle the stresses of life. Treating crying as if it's something only weak people do. My dad in particular used to yell at me for crying, which only made me cry more, which made him yell more. And you get the point. In high school I tried to bring up the possibility of me having anxiety problems that I'd spoken to the school counselor about because my friends made me go since they were worried. He told me I was just a drama queen. I can't express that I'm anxious or stressed around my dad because others have it worse. Even now I'm 21 and seeing a psychiatrist in a couple weeks because I've just felt so bad lately and I would never let my dad know. I think I'd rather die than my dad know I've been seeing a psychiatrist and discussing the possibility of me having OCD with said psychiatrist, which does explain a lot and is actually kind of comforting for me to know because he'd get so mad at me for being weak.